Hey, welcome to Inside the Album. I'm Don Seckler. That's Tommy Hilkin. How you doing, Tom?
Don, real good now. That's Don Seckler. I'm Tommy Hilkin, and I'm looking forward to a great day.
Yeah, and today we are talking about an all-time great album by Eric
Wow.
Clapton. Got my Clapton shirt on here, I'm rocking the Clapton,
Oh, well, that's a nice shirt.
which was given to me by a very generous friend of mine.
Yeah, good guy too.
Yeah, solid guy, solid
Yeah,
guy.
knows where to shop.
So today we're going to do the album Slowhand by Eric Clapton, which,
Nice.
and again, we talk about these albums where these records have, 3, 4, 5 of these artists' all-time great songs, and this is one of it. It's kind of a shorter album with I think there's only 9 songs on it.
Yeah.
But there's 4 of Clapton's most famous, most popular songs, so we'll get into that. It's a great album and a great time, kind of a revitalization of Eric Clapton's career at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
So before we get started, please like, friend, subscribe, click the buttons, do the thing, add a review. And this holiday season, while you're gathering, oh wait, we're not gathering. This holiday season, while you're Zooming with your family, recommend us to a friend if you like the podcast. And Tom, I just wanted to tell you, we've had some interesting progress. We're now have been viewed or actually listened to in 13 different countries, including India, Denmark, Netherlands, UK, Australia, Canada, Ireland, Italy, Spain, Bangladesh, Belgium, and Nepal. So shout out to you people listening in Nepal. Keep it up. We're glad to have you on board.
Don, congratulations. We have gone international, my friend.
Yeah, you're a worldwide sensation, my friend.
For the rest of my life, I'm an international entertainer. That's it.
There you go. All right. So along with our podcast, we're also working with a charity called Music for Mark. And Tom, tell us about Music for Mark.
Yeah, and thanks, Don. Just remember at Christmas time, our podcast is the gift that just keeps giving. You couldn't ask for more. Just, you know what I'm saying, Don. Come on. But listen, Music for Mark, it's why we're doing this, is to connect with as many people who can help us with our foundation. Our mission is to bring music to the world. Don and I connected through music, truly, when we started to talk to each other and got to know each other. We based our conversations around music. So we want to bring music to the world. Our foundation is going to supply kids with musical instruments, musical lessons, anything that can bring music to the world through kids. So think about Music for Mark if you're thinking of bringing music to the world. That's what we want to do.
Yeah, head over to musicformark.com and check it out. There's a website up where you can get involved and help us spread music around the world.
Nice.
So we're going to talk today, like I said, about Eric Clapton's Slowhand. Talk about the band that he played with. The bassist was Carl Randall, drummer Dickie Sims, and Jamie Oldaker was the other guitarist.
All right, I don't know if we want to enter, but it's Carl Randall.
Carl Randall. Okay, great. Yeah, I didn't know how to pronounce.
It's okay.
I'm not good with the pronunciations.
It's an important piece of the puzzle. But go ahead.
So do you know anything about these guys? Because I really don't. I didn't really.
Well, you know what? Carl Randall goes back to Clapton for a long, long time.
Okay.
So I'll just fill you in on Carl Randall because I've seen Carl Randall in concert a couple times. Carl Randall was with Delaney and Bonnie, where Clapton was hanging out with those guys back in his past. Just a great, great musician. But I just want to feel he died at 37 years old. So he really didn't tour along with Clapton. Wow. He was, in those days, and I'm sure we'll get into it, it was heavy drinking, heavy drugging, and it took Carl Randall out at 37 years old.
Wow.
So and listen, 1977, I know what's going on and we'll talk about it, but musically, Carl Randall was a great influence on Clapton. Clapton loved him and would always want to play with him.
Yeah, awesome. So, like you said, it was this album was released on November 27th, 1977. So the very tail end of 77 there. At the time on the charts in the next year, 78, when the album really kind of percolated, you had huge legendary albums that were also popular. You had Rumors by Fleetwood Mac,
Woo.
and you know, that album at that time, and this is, you know, we're getting now into where I'm kind of starting to have those memories, because I was, you know, at this point I was
They're coming back.
63. Yeah. So I was, you know, I was 14 at this point, and I remember that Fleetwood Mac album was on the radio every other song. Every
Wow.
song on it was a hit, and it was
Yep.
so popular. A great album, which we'll talk about down the road.
I'm sure.
Another thing that was happening was Saturday Night Fever with the Bee Gees, and you know, a bunch of other artists on there, but the Bee Gees songs on that album are really huge pop hits.
A little mention here. I don't want to say anything, but
No.
Tommy Hilkins, one of his favorite movies of all times is Saturday Night Fever. You might not know it, but you know, I'm a disco kind of guy. But great album. I just want to share that. The Bee Gees blew it away then.
Yeah, tremendous, and it is a great movie with John Travolta.
Oh yeah.
And then Some Girls by the Stones was popular this year. Again, another great legendary album, which we're definitely going to cover at some point.
Yeah.
There was the Grease soundtrack was also out. Grease was huge. Those
Huge.
songs were so popular. Again, John Travolta and
Olivia Newton-John.
That's right.
Funny
I knew
how
it.
you only remember John Travolta. I'll take care of the women. You take care of the guys.
But that song, I mean, that soundtrack had again another 4 or 5 songs that were just enormous pop songs at that time. And then there, at the end of 1978, there was 52nd Street by Billy Joel. Again, another album with just hit after hit after hit, and very popular. So this album was out there, you know, definitely more blues rock. You know, it's Eric Clapton. It's going to be blues based rock. Yep. And, you know, so it kind of stood out because it was different than the rest of these albums that were popular. So we had a lot of disco, we had some pop stuff, we had the Stones, and then Fleetwood Mac, which is kind of middle of the road, you know, type of music. So it was actually Eric Clapton's 5th solo album. So if you're not familiar with Clapton, before he was a solo artist, he was in Cream and the Yardbirds, and you know, so he had already been called God in the 60s. He was God to people, you know, he was the great guitar slinger, the number one guitarist. So he had this whole reputation, and then he went solo. And his solo records, you know, quite frankly, before this, the 2 that were released before this were really not big albums. So he was kind of in a little bit of a slump, and this album kind of became a rebirth for him.
Yeah. You know, all this time with Clapton, you got to remember, he's the kind of guy, I saw an interview with him. He says it, he's an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. So it depends on where he's at. He's a tremendously talented guy, but the stories he tells himself leads him to go into isolation. Musically, no matter, and personally and musically. So
well, and he's a guy who had the demons, you know, he had issues. He was on heroin and got off heroin. He was, even after he was cleaned off of heroin, he was still drinking heavily and doing other drugs and a lot of weed and stuff like that. But the album was very successful, went to number 2 in the US. Sold over 3 million copies, and it did make it onto Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time at number 325. We talk about the band at this time. Like I said, Clapton was cleaned up off of heroin, which is great because that was really, you know, doing a number on a lot of people in those days. But he was drinking heavily, and so the stories about them in the studio, the whole band was, you know, quite frankly, pretty fucked up when they recorded this.
Yeah, they were.
So, you know, and it's kind of like, so he went through a couple phases with the albums before this. And so this album, I think he saw this as his opportunity to kind of refocus on him as a person. And that kind of comes back to that egomaniac thing of it, this being Eric Clapton and not this group. Because on the album before this, which was A Reason to Cry, that album was recorded at the band called The Band, Eric Clapton recorded No Reason to Cry at the band studio with the
Hmm.
band and Bob Dylan and about a dozen others. So I think when he got, that whole thing was a big group effort pretty much. And then this album, he wanted to be more out in front on Slowhand.
Yeah. In his biography, Clapton's biography, and if you haven't read it and you're a music fan, please do. It's fantastic. But the one thing you'll learn about Clapton through the years, touring, whatever it was, Clapton never really had a band. He would hire guns. He would hire
Right.
people, bass player, drummer. He would just call them up and say, I'm going on tour. Do you want to play with me? It was never a band, as in to say a band. He always
Right.
had hired guns.
And that's something that I think points to the genius of Eric Clapton and his musical ability,
Wow.
because he's doing everything. He's
Hmm.
writing the songs, he's writing the lyrics, he's playing the solos, he's, semi-producing everything and just pulling in all these guys, as studio players.
Sure.
So that's a lot of pressure. When you have, like we talked about last week with, or when we talked about with the Beatles, with Abbey Road,
Right.
you've got four guys, you've got a producer, you got a lot of different influences, a lot of people to bounce stuff off of. It's all on Clapton here.
Yeah.
And it always has been, really.
Yep. And he's always been good with that. He knows what he wants, and the one thing I will say, through the years, he kind of started to develop a lot of really rich relationships with people who started to stay with him longer and longer and longer. In
Yeah.
the last tours I've seen, he worked with the same people a few different times.
Well, and I think being cleaned up and sober has a lot to do with that. I heard interesting. I heard Dave Grohl was interviewed about the death of Kurt Cobain,
Mm,
and Dave Grohl was not a drug user.
right.
Even though he looked like a crazy wild man when he was in
Yeah.
Nirvana with the hair and the drums and everything. But he said it came down to, with Kurt, he said there were people who did drugs and people who didn't do drugs. And if you didn't do drugs, you weren't in with the people who did drugs. So with Nirvana, Kurt got kind of isolated with all these people who were heavy into drugs. And those people are generally not the best people in the world in general,
yeah.
as people. So Dave Dave Grohl said he was kind of, separate from that group, and Kurt was kind of off with all these people. So I think that as Clapton sobered up and got
Yeah.
clean and everything, he didn't, he wasn't hanging around with people to party as much. I mean, that's what it really comes down to, right?
Oh, well, he's sober over 30 years now.
Yeah.
Right. So, we can talk about that a little later on. But yeah, so yeah, life changed. Life shifted for him. I know what it's like. He shifted his life.
Yeah, yeah. So, and and the result is that I think you get better, and like you said, you surround yourself with better people, and you just
Yeah.
have a better life, and that reflects in the music. So Eric Clapton said that this band that he had at this time, they were on fire, and they went into the studio and they banged this out pretty quickly. There was not a lot of rehashing on this. They just played and recorded, and it was good to go because they were so on point. And
Right.
you hear every song on this album is super tight, and just there's no down songs on this. There's nothing on this album. Even the lesser known songs are still great songs.
Well, as I say many, many times when we go through an album, when you say the lesser known songs, those are the kinds that kind of really attract me.
Yeah.
I love those, We'll talk about the hits and what they sound like in concert after a while.
Yeah,
But go
for
ahead.
sure.
When we go through the songs, we'll talk.
Yeah, so Eric is working with Glyn Johns on this album as the producer, and
Hmm.
he had worked with the Stones and the Eagles.
Yeah.
And so Eric kind of liked that because he had worked with British and American artists, and he thought that he would be able to manage this kind of conglomeration, because I think the guys in the band were all American.
Well, Carl Radle was. Yep, I know that for sure.
Yeah. So, it's an English guy with an American band, but they actually recorded this in England. So it's an interesting mix. But again, we have a producer who said he wanted discipline. So that's a recurring theme that we see. And Glyn said that he didn't like Clapton and the guys to be just jamming because it wasted
that.
studio time.
I love that.
How
jamming.
How do you tell Eric Clapton don't jam?
Mm. Well, when you think about it, I love that phrase, that when he said no jam, what he really was let's get down to business. Let's create an album. Let's make an album. Because think about it. What you're saying is you got a bunch of partiers that one day they'll show up, they'll be top of their game. Let's
Right.
get this done. And then you can go party.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I would be horrible as a producer because I'd just say, yeah, keep jamming. I just want to sit there and watch this.
Do that again.
Yeah.
No, I don't blame you. But that's the difference. See, he came in as a businessman. And really, that's the best part. And I think it really was so helpful to Clapton to have someone structuring him and his band where,
Yeah.
like you just said, Clapton probably sat there and said, let's do that again. Like he wasn't a businessman.
Right.
I
Right.
always talk about the showbiz, right? Everybody loves to do the show, but you should just do the show and stay out of the biz. Bring the people in who do the biz and let them do their magic, and
Right.
you do yours. That's
Do what
greatest
you
way
do
to
best.
do what you do best, and that's
Yeah.
that's what they did.
So Eric also said that Slowhand came about because he ran into a contractual problem with Atlantic Records. And so he couldn't work with Tom Dowd, who was a staff producer at Atlantic. So he asked Glenn to make the record, and that became Slowhand.
Yeah.
And like I said before, he didn't have to go to America to do it. He was living in England at the time, and he could work in London with an English producer and just brought the American, musicians over to record with him there in London. And like I said, most of the stuff was recorded, and they do a take and record it, and it was done live. They had to throw a few vocals on afterwards, but very minor stuff. So this again is an album that just came together, and there was no laboring over it. It just really clicked, and everything, the band was playing so well.
Did you want to talk about Slowhand and the meaning behind it, or
Yeah, let's talk about that. Give us a story.
Because I can remember. So you were saying 1977. I was just just finished. When was it released in 77?
November, the end of November.
And I just got out of high school. So I just finished up high school. I remember being in Nick Busanich's house, 68th Street in Guttenberg, and literally showed me the album. And I remember him looking at it and saying, look, Clapton named his album Slowhand. And he talked about how it was like an oxymoron. Like Clapton, of all people, who would ever call him Slowhand?
Yeah.
So for me, I always thought that was the meaning behind it, right? That it was actually an oxymoron, somebody calling him Slowhand. But it's the way he plays, if you think about it, right?
It is. He's not he's one of the best soloist guitar players ever in the history of rock and roll. But he's not a shredder. So he's not going to give you this, it's going to be the right notes in the right place. And it's so amazing. So I've seen him a couple times live, and the last time I saw him was probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And he's touring with top musicians. So the other guitar player on his band was amazing.
Yep.
But there was such a huge difference in the solos when Clapton played it versus the other guitar player. I mean, it was not even close. It was just amazingly different. And this guy who was playing with him was probably better than 99.9% of all guitar players out there.
Oh, well, Doyle Bramall was one of them, and Derek Trucks.
Yeah, Derek Trucks, sure.
You can't ask for more, but
amazing players, right?
I'll share some experience for me with seeing Clapton. Like this week is my turn because I probably, like you, I've seen him 20 times minimal, right?
Yeah.
And through the years. But the one thing about Clapton, I got to just share this because it gets me fired up. On stage, when you say guys are shredding, the only way you would know Clapton was shredding was he would tilt his head back just a tiny little bit,
right,
and kill it.
Oh yeah,
kill it. I mean,
so sweet.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Was he only knew when he was going in to tear it up is when he tilted his head back a little bit.
Yeah,
and it's the way he played.
And the sound he gets live is also amazing. And he even a lot of guys kind of rely on older guitars to get a really good sound because the older guitars generally sound a lot better than the newer ones.
Right.
But Clapton plays new Strats. He gets out there with the recent models. He's not playing his guitars from the 50s and stuff like a lot of bands will do. But he just really, his live sound is amazing.
Yeah, just some of the greatest memories I've ever had.
Yeah,
musically.
And the other thing about the slow hand thing, Clapton kind of liked it because he saw it as like a Western, like a gunslinger type term,
There
you
you go.
know, and so kind of like a badass. And I like it. I think it's, you know, it's a really good kind of moniker, and he's held on to it over the years and embraced it.
Hey, listen, you go from being called God to Slowhand.
Yeah,
It's a great,
that's right.
you know what I mean? You can't beat that.
Yeah.
Something's going right.
And in back in the day in the 60s, there, you know, there was graffiti in London that said
Oh,
Clapton is God, you know, that kind
yeah,
of stuff. So
everywhere.
they people
Yep.
were super into Clapton back in the day. All right. So let's jump right into the songs here. We're gonna kick it off with
Mm-mm.
the album opener, which is probably Clapton's most famous song, I would think that most people know.
Yep.
If you wanna hang out, you got to take her out. Cocaine. If you wanna get down, down on the ground. Cocaine. She don't lie, she don't lie, she don't lie. Cocaine.
So this song is probably a lot of people already know this. So this is a J.J. Cale song, so it's
Hmm.
a cover song basically, and there are a bunch of cover songs on this album. And so the J.J. Cale version is very similar. It's not much different, you know.
Right.
He Claptonized it, but he
Yep.
stuck pretty true to the original. And J.J. Cale, for people who don't know, I guess would you classify him as blues or country or?
You know, it's a great question. He's a Southern country blues guy.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you don't know J.J. Cale, listen to his music. Extremely talented guitar player. Just
Yeah.
amazing sound.
Yeah, and so you can hear, I think you know, I think he's got, I would call him a blues guy with a country tinge, kind of. You know, you can hear the country in it and in some of his phrasings and things
Yeah.
like that.
You know, to be honest with you, I would think you would just label him J.J. Cale.
Yeah,
And I think most people did, because if you ever saw him play, he was a different kind of guy. You couldn't really shoe him into anywhere in rock and roll. He was J.J. Cale. And
yeah,
you know, some of his songs were created by some of the greatest. You know, "Call Me the Breeze" is a J.J. Cale song.
right.
"Bringing It Back," that Kansas cover, is a J.J. Cale song.
Oh, really? Oh, I
And
didn't
so,
know that one, huh?
oh yeah,
Did you ever see Cale live or?
I never saw J.J. Cale live. I only saw him playing on when Crossroads, Clapton brought him out on Crossroads a couple of different times,
Oh,
and I
okay.
have the recordings of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I got introduced to J.J. Cale through "Cocaine," the song. So I had
Huh.
no idea who he was,
Okay.
but now I do, and I'm glad I do.
Well, I think that was the entry. If anybody's aware of J.J. Cale, that's how they know him,
Yeah.
from the writing Cocaine.
Yeah.
So, you know, as I said before, Clapton was just off of heroin, still drinking a lot and smoking weed and maybe even doing coke. I don't know for sure, but there was a lot of, they were messed up in the studio a lot. But the song Cocaine is really against cocaine. So it's talking about how bad it is.
Right.
And so Clapton kind of got frustrated over the years because people embraced it as this huge, yay, cocaine song, you know? Woohoo!
Cocaine.
Cocaine! And he was like, no, damn it,
No,
that's not right.
no.
So
Yeah.
there was a while where he stopped playing it live. And I mean, how do
Yeah.
you do that? It's your biggest hit.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's an overstatement. It's probably his biggest solo hit.
Right.
But how do you take it out of the set? So then he started saying things like dirty cocaine live and stuff like that to try and reinforce that it's bad, you know, don't do
So
it.
funny. I've heard him do it. I've seen him do both versions.
Yeah. So
He'll just rip into that dirty cocaine.
right.
Yeah.
And you know, I think people think, hey, it was the 70s, end of the 70s, early 80s. He was just super into coke.
Yeah. Matter of fact, many people were.
Yeah, right. You know,
Yeah, we'll
it's
leave it at that.
never
Go
a
ahead.
thing for me. Never got into it, but I definitely saw a lot of it around.
It was around.
Yeah. So
I
also,
like the smell of it.
oh yeah,
Yeah. No, it's just a joke.
the smell of it.
There you go.
So,
It took a little while to kick in.
it did.
All right.
I haven't
There's
had
our
any
out-
cocaine this morning.
There's our outtakes. And please use the one where you just said I haven't had any cocaine this morning.
That'll be our opener.
This is great. This is great. All right, we digress, folks.
Yeah, a
Go
little
ahead.
bit.
Little
So while they're recording this album during the sessions, Eric Clapton actually went to go see J.J. Cale play a show.
Yeah.
And Clapton got up on stage and actually played Cocaine with JJ while they were in the sessions recording the song for Clapton. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, they became through the years very good friends.
Yeah.
Very good friends.
The other interesting thing is that Cocaine was not a single off this album. So even though it's probably the most well-known song on the album, it was never released as a single.
Yeah. As we were talking, I said to you, the other cuts on the album became so interesting to me because I have to share this with you. This song has been so overplayed that it's like sometimes you can't even keep it on. It's great live. Listen, when it comes out live, the crowd's rocking, the tune's great. But man, oh man, back in the 70s and 80s, this song played every 5 minutes, man. It was just it was one of those songs that you were like, okay, great song. But you know what? Everybody did that back in the WNEW days and things like that, our radio station in New York City. Songs got overplayed, and this was certainly one of them.
Yeah, definitely. Well, radio playlists are always tight, so you hear the same songs over and over again. It gets very boring, and it can ruin songs for you. I've had that effect with myself on some songs on radio.
No doubt.
Just because you just get sick of them. So let's move on to Wonderful Tonight.
It's late in the evening. She's wondering what clothes to wear. She puts on her makeup and brushes her long, long hair. And then she asks me, do I look alright? And I say yes, you look wonderful tonight.
So this song, obviously a love song.
Obviously.
Do you know who?
Patty Boyd.
Yes, you're
Yes.
right. Ding, ding,
Well,
ding.
That guy, he was addicted to Patty Boyd. I'll talk about that.
So
Yeah.
that's what I want to do, a whole episode on Patty Boyd, because Patty Boyd was the wife of George Harrison.
George Harrison, yeah.
Eric Clapton stole her from George Harrison.
Yeah.
Harrison, and then Clapton wrote Layla about her,
Yeah.
and also this song. And
Yeah.
Harrison wrote songs about her. So
Yeah.
there's something about Patty Boyd. Yeah, I've seen pictures. She's a pretty lady, must be an awesome person because they both love her so much. But just crazy how much influence she had over the 70s rock and roll scene, right?
I just watched a 60 Minutes interview with Clapton, and they asked him if he was in love with Patty Boyd. And he said, I'm not sure. I was addicted to everything back then, and I always felt like it was more of an addiction. So,
Really? Huh.
Yeah, interesting way to look at it, but I understand the concept.
Sure.
Like everything in his life that he liked to the extreme,
Yeah.
and she just happened to be one of them.
But isn't love an addiction? I mean, you're around somebody, you want to be with them all the time. I mean, I think it always is, right?
Well, yeah, that's a great question.
Or is he saying that it was an addiction to his detriment in some way?
Next week, I think we should have Dr. Phil on because I don't have that answer about love and addiction.
Okay.
Because I can tell you this, I didn't love addiction. So we'll go.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody does.
Yeah, so
after the fact.
It's fun while it lasted.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is, Layla, which is also about Patty Boyd, was a real howl kind of, Layla. It's very not aggressive, but it's this, kind of angsty type of thing. And then here is this gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful song that is also about the same woman. Yeah. So it's just amazing that one person can be a muse for so many great musicians.
Yeah, oh, really? But think about it. But musical note, concert, one of the greatest moments ever. Went from Wonderful Tonight right into Layla. I remember one of the nights I took my kids, and literally he rolled right from one right into the other.
Wow.
And you want to just talk about getting a group into a frenzy. It worked.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, Layla is a whole different level.
And let's not forget, back in my day, this was a big wedding song. Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, right. It must have been everybody's wedding song, right?
How do I look? You look wonderful. Come on.
Well, here's the story behind this song. So Eric and Patty were going to go to a Buddy Holly tribute that Paul McCartney put together. And so Clapton was, waiting for her to get dressed. Like, you wait for your woman as she's getting ready and she's asking, how do I look? Am I ready? Blah, blah, blah. And so he's sitting there playing around with his guitar and she's trying on these dresses and, she's freaking out about her hair and her clothes. And she comes downstairs and he goes, "Hey, listen to this." And he had the whole song written. Like he wrote it while he's waiting for his wife to get ready. How insane is that?
Dude, you could write a book in the time it takes for your wife to get ready.
But it's like, again, this stuff
Edit that out,
but go ahead. Again, that we talk about, like we talked about George Harrison and how these songs just came out of him, and this same thing is happening with Clapton here.
Yeah.
So an amazing backstory. The other songs that Patty inspired, and we talked about her as a muse. So George Harrison, Something, and For You Blue were both written about Patty. Clapton had Layla, Why Does Love Have to Be So Sad, and Forever Man is allegedly inspired by Patty Boyd as well.
Some terrific songs right there, huh?
Yeah. And so the single, Wonderful Tonight, was a single. It was a hit, made it to number 16 in the US. And again, this is during, this time of all these mega hits that were out there. So challenging times on the charts, and he still had a lot of success. Yeah,
Fleetwood Mac really had charge of the airways back then, for sure.
Oh, yeah, they dominated.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So let's take a listen to Lay Down Sally. And this is even kind of a J.J. Cale style riff, right?
It certainly is. The funky Phil.
Yeah, right.
There is nothing that is wrong in wanting you to stay here with me. I know you've got somewhere to go, but won't you make yourself at home and stay with me? And don't you ever leave. Lay down, Sally, and rest here in my arms. Don't you think you want someone to talk to? Lay down, Sally, no need to leave so soon. I've been trying all night long just to talk to you.
So this song, again, another song about ladies. There's a lot of rock music about girls. And, just trying to get this girl to stay in bed with them. And the thing I like about it, it's not typical of Clapton's very, like we said, Clapton's a very blues-based guy. This one's a little bit more country western. There's a little shuffle in there. It's got a whole different sound for Clapton.
It's got a little bop to it. Yeah, it really does.
Yeah. And even Eric said that it's as close as an Englishman could get to being J.J. Cale. So, he was definitely kind of leaning into that and borrowing or copying J.J.'s style of guitar a little bit.
Dude, you can start to see his personality is what I'm talking about. When he meets someone and likes someone, right? All of a sudden, like he was in love with the blues. He didn't just like the blues, Robert Johnson, right? He didn't, once he met J.J. Cale, he was possessed. He was hooked on J.J. Cale. Yeah, it's fascinating to watch, but this is how his life was. Whatever he met, whatever he liked, he wanted to be or do. So
and he went in 110%.
Always.
And from everything, from the drugs to the women to the music, it's all, this is a guy who doesn't do things halfway. It's 110% every time.
And a little thing on this song, It Takes Me Back. You got to remember, these were my days of hanging out, listening to music. Another one of those songs, a tremendous amount of airplay. Tremendous on the radio.
Oh yeah. And it's so happy and joyous. I like it. It's just such a great song. Interesting fact, Marcy Levy, one of the backup singers, actually helped him write this. And she's the voice that you hear on there. And she had actually toured with Bob Seger before starting to work with Eric Clapton in 1973.
Wow.
So that female voice, and I think the female voice on his songs, especially on this album, really, they give it another degree, there's another kind of level to them. I love it. It's a nice little counter to his, he's got a more of I guess it's a baritone type voice, a little bit lower. So it's a good, again, a lot of times we talk about like quiet to loud and the contrast between sounds. And that male-female voice can have that same effect sometimes.
Now, you'd mentioned about Clapton singing and his voice and baritone. You'll hear it in a few of the songs. You really listen. He was really like phlegmy. He felt at a time in his career, right around here, probably before he was making this album, that he could no longer sing. He started to tell himself stories that he started to believe. He didn't even think he could play anymore. Or sing anymore. He was down and out. So
he also
interesting.
He also was a heavy smoker too, right? I mean, everybody smoked cigarettes back then, I guess. So that doesn't help.
No, they would just, he was destroying himself all over. So, you wake up and you got to go sing. No, I don't feel like. Yeah.
All right. So let's take a listen to Next Time You See Her. To me, this sounds a lot like the band, right?
Yeah, sure.
No.
No, I'm saying, you got your slide in there,
Yeah.
She got everything a man could ever ask for. She is lovely, brighter than a morning star. She is so beautiful, portrait of a sunset. She got everything, including my yoke on. Next time you see her, tell her that I love her. Next time you see her, tell her that I care. Next time you see her, tell her that I love her. Next time I see you, boy, you better beware.
So that line right there, this is a real Jekyll and Hyde song. So next time you see her, tell her I love her. And then he has this kind of threatening line also to the same person, right? And at one point he says, "If you see her again, I will surely kill you." And it's such musically, it's so happy and like I said, I think it sounds a little like the band there, that kind of vibe. And the band is always kind of upbeat and little mellow but upbeat and happy. And then there's this I love her and don't mess with her kind of thing. So
think about it, right? What we're talking about, a lot of conflict going on in his life between himself and inside his head. This is all conflict, right? You're thinking about what's going on. There's nothing is just smooth and things are going good. There's a conflict, right? And I just wanted to share this with you. You know me. I always like the songs, the B-sides, and this song is incredible. Yeah. This to me was the hit off the album. I just love this song.
Great song.
Real good. Amazing what it takes to become the hit song off the album. But to me, that's the one I'd put on.
Yeah, yeah, so good. So let's take a listen to the next song on the album, which is "We're All the Way."
Mm-hmm.
There's no cause to think that I won't stay. Haven't I been with you all the way? There's no time like now to make amends. After all, we are more than friends. This could be the time for you and me.
And there's that backup vocal again, right?
We could
So pretty.
go wherever we should be. So don't put words between us we shouldn't say. And don't be acting halfway when you know we're all the way.
So this is another one of those cover songs that we were talking about, originally done by Don Williams, who was an American country singer. And, I think it's beautiful. It's pretty. I love the two voices. I think just totally adds another dimension to it.
Yeah, Don, like I said, listen to the whole album, folks. Put the hits on the back end. This is just a great album because of these secondary songs, man. That's a great song.
Yeah.
Great song.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love everything about it.
It's so good.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so let's dive into The Core, which is, again, one of the legendary songs on it.
Legendary.
And here you're going to listen to the guitars. So the other guitar player is kind of bobbing and weaving with Clapton, and the vocals are kind of doing the same thing. So let's take a listen.
Every morning when I wake, a feeling soon begins to overtake me. Ringing in my ears resounds through my brain and finally surrounds me.
There is fire, there is life, there is passion, fever and fury. Well, there is love and there is hate, there is longing, anger and worry.
I am afraid.
Got horns in there.
Feel it touch my heart, and down at my core is the hardest part. I can run without fear.
So this song, the original title was The Riff because it's a fucking amazing riff. I
I wonder why.
yeah, so they had it called The Riff, then it was called Burning Hot Core, and then finally they cut it back to just the core. It's a longer song. It's almost 9 minutes long, so unusual for Clapton.
Yeah.
Although he's had some longer songs in the past, with Layla is pretty long. But on this album, it's definitely the longest song. And there's also some horns in the background there. So that's not something Clapton did a lot of. There weren't a lot of horns in his music.
Right.
And it's interesting because you had other bands at the time, like we talked about, where you have the Stones, like bringing in horns at this time. And, in this
Billy
late
Joel.
70s, Billy Joel had horns. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So there was a lot of that kind of stuff that, again, Eric Clapton kind of sticks true to who Eric Clapton is. He really doesn't change with the times much. You could probably say that he did a little bit in the 80s when he worked with Phil Collins a lot on some of those albums. They were, I guess, more poppy albums, but for the most part, Clapton is always Clapton, right?
Oh, and if you listen to the core, right, the riff, awesome, but it's laid on top of a very simplistic song. The rest of the music, there's absolutely nothing to it. It's just
Oh, yeah.
beautiful rock and roll, nice
Right.
and easy, right? set pace, and then they just throw it in there. It's amazing.
Well, and often the best songs are the simplest songs. It's amazing how many
Always.
more simple songs are huge popular hits than these kind of over the top complicated things that you get from, crazy bands like ELP or King Crimson or some of these progressive type bands where it gets super complicated with 8 billion things happening at once.
Long live Chuck Berry.
Yeah, right. It's a lot of basic riffs and really simple beats, but it all comes together so well.
Absolutely. Great song.
So let's talk about May You Never. This is another cover song.
Never lay your head down without a hand to hold. You never make your bed out in the cold. May you never lose your temper if you get hit in a barroom fight. May you never lose your woman overnight. Well, you're just like a great strong sister to me, and I know that your love is true. And you hold no blade but to stab me in my back.
So again, this is a perfect example of that what we just said. That's simplicity. It's just like the drums are like do do do
Yep. Okay.
boom,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Yeah. It's just hanging out. Hey, I want to throw you something on this song, and if you wanted to listen to it again, replace Clapton's voice with Keith Richards. That is a Keith Richards song if I ever heard one. If
There you
think
go.
about it, dude, I was just thinking about it. I go, that's a song Keith Richards has got to cover. It's perfect for him because the vocal changes just like Keith Richards. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to Keith, see if I can get him to cover that.
Yeah,
for me.
set that up.
Yeah. He'll take
So-
my call.
He always does. I mean, you're Tommy Elkin. Damn it.
Come on. He's inside the album right now.
Yeah.
He didn't even know it.
He's probably the one listening in Belgium. Amsterdam. So that song, May You Never, was originally done by John Martin. He's kind of a guy who did folk, jazz, rock, and the blues all kind of mixed up together.
Mhm.
But it's still, to me, if you didn't know it wasn't an Eric Clapton song, it sounds like an Eric Clapton song. It sounds like songs he's written. So, it's just such a great fit for him.
Great song.
Yeah.
Again, the B-sides, baby.
Right. And this is, stuff that's not as well known. And, at the end of the album, I don't know if people get to it all the time. Side 2.
But personally, and this is just me talking to you and not everybody else out there, though, the fact is, when we go through these albums, the greatest thing that you and I get is we get to really listen to them, and that's what I remind everybody. Stop just putting them on. Take these albums, sit down one day, separate yourself, and listen to them.
Right.
It blows your mind, man. It's just great.
These albums, when we first listened to them, they were mostly on record, and you listen to the whole thing. And so this kind of brings us back into that zone where we're enjoying the whole album and not just the super popular songs.
No one will ever understand what it was like to try and get the needle in between two songs. No one.
It wasn't worth the effort. You just listen to the bad songs because you don't want to.
You couldn't do that. It was driving you crazy.
So this next song is Mean Old Francis. And this again is another cover song by a country guy named Arthur Crudup.
But
Very bluesy though for country, right?
very. Again. Right?
Yeah, super simple on the drums.
That mean old dirty Frisco and that low down Santa Fe. Mean old Frisco and that low down Santa Fe.
this song too is, I mean, it's a 12-bar blues song. You know, it's that 1-4-5. You know, with the chord. That's the chords are the 1 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord. Typical blues, you know, setup for the song. But Arthur Crudup was a country guy, so it just shows you how much crossover there is between country, blues, and rock. You know, they're interchangeable almost, even though they're very distinguishable as music types.
You know, we talked about it the other day. When it comes down to it, right? It could be punk and new wave. It's rock and roll.
Right.
It's rock and roll. And you know, and the blues is where it all started.
Yeah.
You know, so musically, everything started with the blues, and then it made its way up and became rock and roll. And, you know, we can look back at the lineage where it all came from. Clapton is not without, you know, his legends and the people that he followed and loved, right?
Sure.
It's what created him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we benefit from it.
Oh, well, listen, give me more Slide any day. I love Slide. So I really do.
So the last song on the album is actually an instrumental, and it's called Peaches and Diesel. Let's take a listen. And so this is a perfect example of Clapton playing the right notes at the right time. It's not a, you know, it's not a kind of thing. It's the solo is perfect throughout it. And this song was actually the B-side to Wonderful Tonight.
Let me ask you, do you have any other, I've always had my opinion about this song, so I don't know if it fits or if you have any thoughts on
tell me
it,
what you
but,
think.
You know, well, Clapton was great friends with Duane Allman. And Duane Allman got killed by a peach truck on a motorcycle. And that's why, so that's why Eat a Peach was the Allman Brothers. The next album they made without Duane was called Eat a Peach. And so Duane Allman got killed. Oh yeah, he got killed riding a motorcycle. So Peaches and Diesel, truck Peaches, is this I'll do some research, but I put it together all the years. I just figured it was his tribute to Duane Allman.
You're probably right.
They were best friends from Derek and the Dominoes, and you know, putting those out, 461 Ocean Boulevard. You know, you want to talk about slide guitar? Oh my God.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting fact.
So there's something else interesting about this song, and as I'm listening to it, I'm hearing it was a B-side for Wonderful Tonight, but I'm also kind of hearing Wonderful Tonight. Listen to this right here.
Go ahead.
Right?
Yeah. It's funny.
It's crazy. It's like, and you know, he knows what he's doing there. It's like incorporated into a little bit of that riff is incorporated into this song.
It might have been his first laying out of Wonderful Tonight.
It may have been, yeah.
You know, when they're structuring the music, a lot of times they just record and then it changes as it grows. So that's pretty cool that you picked that up, but you could hear it, you know, certainly playing along with it.
Yeah.
So. What a great album. So one of my favorite stories, you know, I'm in the garden and I always would look and see Clapton, right? Clapton, I'd see Clapton, I'd say, man, it'd be great if B.B. King could come out. I'd go see B.B. King, I'd say, man, how great would it be, you know, if Clapton would come out. I always had this dream. I always kept it alive. 20 years, 25 years. So I take my wife, my sister, and my sister's husband, and we go to the garden and we see Crossroads. So it's Jimmy Vaughan, Robert Cray, Clapton in an empty chair. And I'm sitting there and I hear Clapton walk up to the mic and say, ladies and gentlemen, the king of the blues, Mr. B.B. King.
Nice.
So, I literally, Don, you wanted my love for rock and roll. I started to cry.
Yeah.
It was like,
it took
25 years, man. And there it was. You know, it was one of the greatest moments. So Clapton had such a love for BB, you know, and it was,
Yeah.
that's what I love about Clapton. And I want to say this, we were talking about J.J. Cale earlier. Clapton always took care of the people who took care of him. At the end, he would take J.J. Cale out with him. They recorded an album together at the end when J.J. Cale was getting a little older and a little sicker. So he always put, you know, he always put money on these people's plates later on in life, which was really, really good thing about him. So great album. Great being with you. You want to close it out?
Yeah,
That's all I got.
Yeah, that's it. That's Slow Hand by Eric Clapton. We're going to take a break next week. So Christmas is coming up, no show. But then we're going to come back and we're going to start the new year with the first album by Van Halen. So it's Van Halen by Van Halen.
Oh, I got some stories there.
I bet you do. All right. Thanks,
Tom.
everybody.
Good job, man.
Subscribe, like, review, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.